Now, and we're checking back on with Brandon Scott. It's been almost 4 months now since Harvey hit Southeast Texas, and we wanted to give you an update on the recovery progress in Port Arthur, one of many areas that were hit really hard. And last segment, Brandon, we were talking about housing. Short-term housing is still a big problem. There are still people waiting on FEMA trailers, and that's a need maybe that a lot of people don't even realize. I mean, it's still there.
Absolutely, Jillian. As we were mentioning earlier, housing has been basically the number one concern for people. Either they're in temporary housing or they haven't received temporary housing yet, and they're having to live with a family member or a friend. We've seen a lot of cases like that. We've heard of a lot of cases like that. And so we are joined with Port Arthur Mayor Derrick Freeman, who is going to speak to some of these issues for us. Mayor, obviously you've heard a lot from constituents about, where's the check, where's the money, how and when can we get started on the rebuild, at least in terms of some relief at this point. What are you hearing in terms of progress and what needs to be done?
Well, the big thing is we got to get a federal bill passed. They did about $160 billion for Hurricane Sandy. Just a week ago, they had about $80 billion that they had put aside for hurricane victims this past season, and it just didn't pass. So we need those dollars to do the long-term recovery housing that really needs to happen here in Port Arthur.
And to be sure, those spending bills that you're talking about, if they've cleared the House, they need to go through the Senate now, right?
Yes.
I believe is where we stand on that.
Yes.
Now, as far as other issues, obviously you got roads, streets, trash, these issues.
Yeah.
What are some of the priorities going into 2018?
Well, making sure that we rise to the occasion. People got FEMA checks right now. FEMA have insurance. People have insurance checks, and they're looking for a place to move to rebuild. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can within our power to assure them, to convince them that they need to stay with us here in Port Arthur, rebuild here in Port Arthur. We're picking up trash. A few days after the hurricane, we had people out there cutting grass, trimming curbs, weed eating things, and people were asking, why are you doing that? Because we want to show our citizens that we're here to work and we want you here in Port Arthur. So the big thing is letting citizens know, and the people in the sound of my voice, we're working hard for you. Come on home, stay with us, rebuild in Port Arthur, invest in Port Arthur. We have a lot of great things that are on the horizon.
Now, we're talking about rebuilding with the people here. What about the folks who were displaced and they're no longer here? We saw a lot of people flown out of here to Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, cities around. Houston was going through some of the similar stuff that we were, but different cities around the state. How do we get those people back?
Well, like I just said, we got to convince them that this is the place to be. I've said during the hurricane that we really didn't want folks to get too comfortable in some of those other cities. Of course, we want you to be able to live life, but we didn't want you to get comfortable because we want you back home in Port Arthur helping us rebuild. Be comfortable here. That's the thing. We're working hard. We have elected officials that are working hard on your behalf. We're making sure we're keeping our ear to the street and keeping our voice in a lot of these elected officials on the federal and state level, keeping it in their ear too, so they know that the need is here in Port Arthur and it's great. Don't forget about us.
How does this event change the calculus for you guys as local leaders, given that you already had issues that you had to deal with before the storm? You already had priorities. Mm-hmm. How does this alter that and sort of change the way you approach things?
Well, my little boy said it best. Our city got baptized. So, we had an old man before and we had some things that were looking bad, but we left that down in the water. We're coming up new. It's going to be a phoenix rising in Port Arthur. We're excited about it, optimistic. There's going to be an influx of dollars once these bills finally do pass, and hopefully we can direct those dollars to the right places, to the places that have the greatest need in Port Arthur. So we're excited about it. We're about to make some changes.
So again, Jillian, housing, streets, trash, these are the primary issues for the citizens of Port Arthur, and something that the mayor is having to prioritize from his standpoint as well.
Absolutely. And if you could maybe share one message to anybody watching this, in his community, not just his community, but anybody who's been a victim of Harvey, what would you say?
What would be your message to Harvey survivors? Jillian's asking about that. Just, not just Port Arthur, but you've gone through it as a person. Aside from being mayor, what would you say just as to anyone who's going through this?
Stay strong. Stay strong. We're working, and if you can, if it's in your capacity, check on your neighbor. Right now it's time of community. Like when folks were in their homes and water was to their ceiling, it was about community that saved us. So the thing that's going to get us through is community. So stay strong, and if you have it in your capacity, check on your neighbors, check on your friends and your family. Let's do it together.
Yeah, so a pretty simple message, check on your neighbors and do the best you can with what you have.
Right, something we can all do. Thank you, Brandon. And thank you for that update as well. You know, it'd been a while since we'd done that, so we did want to bring you up to speed on